Historic HBCUs or HBCUs, historic black colleges and universities, are now becoming full by who? By black students who are flocking to them because of the racism that is being indiscriminately projected toward them on the college campuses of white racist universities and being targeted in the Trump era. And why are they going to HBCUs? Because Black history cannot be erased and it's being preserved. And it can be taught the way that it's supposed to be taught. Tyrone Bowman, live. According to an article in The Guardian, in the U.S. News section written by David Smith, when Beverly Daniel Tatum told a friend that she was writing a book about higher education, he replied, "I think being a college president has to be the hardest job in America." Indeed, the academic year 2023-2024 was an annus horribilis for college presidents, according to the Chronicle of Higher Education. And that was before Donald Trump returned to the White House and sought to bend them to his will. Over the past several months, the U.S. president targeted elite universities, accusing them of fostering anti-Semitism, liberal bias, and un-American diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI initiatives. His administration has frozen billions of dollars in federal research funding to pressure institutions to align with its ideological goals. "I wish I knew what was motivating it," says Tatum, a former president of Spelman College, one of the U.S.'s leading historically black colleges and universities, or HBCUs, via Zoom from Atlanta. Quote, close quote. Quote, "It is quite puzzling given the fact that higher education in the United States is the envy of the world, or has been. Many institutions are a major source of importing talent, a major source of prestige in terms of research and innovation. And that has been true for quite a long time. It's not clear to me why anybody or anyone would want to disrupt that. It's unfortunate that it is being disrupted in this way, and I don't think it will bode well for the United States in the long term," quote, close quote. I want to say something in all fairness. There are a lot of goodwill, good intended white men and women who have historically, when you search the annals of history, who have fought for and stood with black people during the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and even now. For what? For equal rights, and you can name it. It's a marginalized group of individuals who keep saying our country, our land, our way of life, and all that other kind of crap and garbage that they keep talking about. And the sad thing about it is, they don't even know their own history. So HBCUs are a safe haven for our black men and women to attend. So Tatum, who is now 70, was president of Spelman from 2002 to 2015, a period she describes as the best years of my life. She received the award for outstanding lifetime contribution to psychology, the highest honor presented by the American Psychological Association. She has also written 4 books, including the bestseller, "Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria?" Her answer to that question, in summary, was, "Because there's comfort in being with people who have a shared experience and a shared misunderstanding." A shared understanding. But what people don't always recognize, particularly at predominantly white institutions, is that the students who are sitting together in the cafeteria are often the same students who are writing for the campus newspaper or working on the yearbook or playing on the sports teams. Quote, close quote. Tatum returned to the higher education arena in July 2022, spending a year as president of Mount Holyoke College in South Hadley, Massachusetts. She recalls during that year, so many people asked me, "Why would you do that? Isn't that a horrible job?" It seems to be the hardest job in America. Of course, being a college president is very challenging. But in the questions that people ask me, I could see that there was a lack of understanding about colleges and how they operate and the good that leaders can do, not only the institution, for the institution, but for the larger society. She decided to write an insider's guide to higher education and the issues facing its leaders, peril and promise. College leadership in turbulent times, is part memoir and part call to action. It grapples with multiple interlocking crises in higher education, declining enrollment and rising costs, debates around free speech and anti Semitism, unionizing student workers and athletes. All of it has been turbocharged by Trump, who has shaken the U.S.'s cathedral of learning to the foundations and put colleges and college presidents in the crossfire of the cultural wars. In April, his administration said it would freeze more than $2.2 billion in grants and $60 million in contracts to Harvard after the institution vowed to defy demands to limit activism on campus. And recently, it was ruled by Supreme Court that Trump unlawfully canceled $2.2 billion in Harvard research grants. Earlier this month, the White House suspended $584 million in federal funding for the University of California, Los Angeles over allegations of civil rights violations related to anti-Semitism and affirmative action. You know, I'm so tired of these people with their coded language, like we can't decipher what they're saying. It's called anti-whiteness that they're trying to espouse. Clarence Thomas, the only black man on the Supreme Court, got to where he is because of affirmative action. And then after his sorry self got to where he is, he was the main opposer of affirmative action and has now decided to become an ardent oppositionist against affirmative action. When he used affirmative action for undergrad, masters, and beyond. And he was a, quote, DEI pick under President Herbert H. Bush. Since we want to deal with DEI, he chose him and nominated him, and he's the son-in-law of then Senator Stanford. So don't lecture me about affirmative action when affirmative action has been used all across the board, continuously, by all kinds of people. And now there's a problem with affirmative action. There would not have been a need for affirmative action in America if there had not been racial discrimination across the board against black people. Let's deal with the historical footnotes of history and deal with the facts. Yeah, I know folk don't want to hear the facts because they're self-opinionated and they believe every little thing that's treated to them in childlike language so they can understand it. Well, many of us can read, write, decipher, analyze, and speak coherently when it comes to things. Now, back to what I was saying. It has also launched investigations into alleged anti-Semitism at numerous institutions, often tied to campus protests over the Israeli-Gaza war. More than 660 presidents of colleges, universities, and scholarly societies have signed a statement denouncing Trump's actions as, quote, unprecedented government overreach, end quote. That means nothing, y'all. You know what hurts? Let me tell you what hurts America. Let me tell you what hurts big business. Boycotting. When you use the power of boycotting, you can change the trajectory of anything in this nation. You can cause any billion-dollar-a-year company to go bankrupt. With all of its racism and bigotry and vitriol, you can bring it down to its knees by simply not patronizing them and buying their products. But too many people, they're not going to work together. They're not going to stand together. They're not going to fight together. They did it during the civil rights era because we That's all we had. Tatum laments an assault on education, science, and knowledge itself. It does say something fundamental if we look at the disruption of the historic partnership between the federal government and research universities, the cutting of the National Science Foundation and the National Institutes of Health, and the interruption of grants even as they're coming to completion. If we look at the attack on science more broadly and universities as places of cultural production and science, one has to wonder how attacks on the production of knowledge matches up with making America great again. I cannot connect that dot. Harvard has been the most defiant, suing the administration over funding cuts and international student bans, arguing these actions infringe on academic freedom. It is negotiating a potential $500 million settlement, but insists on preserving its autonomy. Universities including Columbia, Brown, and the University of Pennsylvania have negotiated settlements, agreeing to pay millions and make policy changes, such as banning masks at protests or revising transgender athlete policies to secure funding. Some observers have accused them of capitulation. Tatum comments, it is important for institutions to stand up for themselves. At the same time, having been in the president's role, it is easy for people looking in to say you should do X or you should do Y. Armchair quarterbacking is a popular sport, but the alums of these institutions, if you think about the graduates of Harvard and Columbia and the Ivy League more broadly, make up the large percentage of leaders and decision makers in the United States. If all those leaders and decision makers stood up and said, stop attacking our institution, we would see change in behavior. There has been no greater flashpoint since Hamas's terrorist attack on Israel on the 7th of October, 2023, than anti Semitism and Islamophobia, or Islamophobia on university campuses. In April, Harvard promised to review its academic offerings and admission policies in response to a pair of internal reports on anti Semitism and anti Arab prejudice. Tatum says it's important to point out that there are Jewish students who are opposed to what was happening in Palestine. Some of the protests at Columbia were being led by Jewish students, so it's kind of misrepresenting what happened on campus to talk about it as a case of being anti Semitic or not. Clearly, there was a lot of hostile behavior being discredited toward Jewish students. That was real, as was their hostile behavior being directed toward Muslim students. Republicans have accused university leaders of allowing anti Semitism to run unchecked. Activists say they're trying to suppress legitimate criticism of Israel. Asked if she thinks Trump has weaponized the issue, Tatum offers only a 6-word answer. It looks that way to me, quote, close quote. Tatum advocates bringing students together for Jewish high holidays, for example, hosting a meal to break the feast after Yom Kippur as a way of affirming the presence of Jewish students on campus. If you've been doing things like that where students feel recognized, feel seen, you might still disagree about what's happening in the Middle East. But it's not necessarily going to be framed as you're anti Semitic or the institution is anti Semitic. For HBCUs, meanwhile, these are the best of times and the worst of times as Trump takes aim at the institutions such as Harvard and Columbia. HBCUs are flying below the radar and witnessing a surge in applications, but they face difficulties of their own. As a society, you know what? I need to take a break. I'll be right back right after this. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm back, Tyrone Bowman Live. I'm talking about how HBCUs are seeing a huge increase in enrollment. So let's get back to what I'm talking about here now. I'm going to pick it up where I left off at. For HBCUs, meanwhile, these are the best of times and the worst of times, as Trump takes aim at elite institutions such as Harvard and Columbia. HBCUs are flying below the radar and witnessing a surge in applications, but they face difficulties of their own. What are they? As the society becomes more anti-Black in its expression, we see students seeking out HBCUs as communities where they will feel affirmed, included, and not have to deal with a lot of unnecessary distractions that are rooted in their identity as Black students. As people are talking about eliminating historical references in museums, for example, all of that fuels interest on the part of Black students in HBCUs because they know that's a place where their history is not being erased. The challenge is that many of the applicants are in need of financial aid, and HBCUs don't have enough financial aid to go around to meet the full need of all those students. Well, what happened to the Parade of Stars that the late Lou Rawls used to raise millions of dollars for? What happened to the United Negro College Fund that the late Congressman William H. Gray, when he left Congress, he became president of the organization that raised the money? You need to go back to that time. Listen, y'all, revive things from the past. Raise money. There are enough Black millionaires and billionaires to raise money to support and sustain HBCUs. Period. Sheesh. Think, use your mind. Let your mind expand and grow. Stop talking about what HBCUs don't have and do something about it. That's why I don't like to read the report from the Urban League. It's nothing but doom and gloom every time their annual report. Pessimism, doubt. So chapter 2 of the book is entitled Who's Afraid of DEI, and why Tatum notes that a backlash against racial progress and the rise of white nationalist movements has manifested in a flurry of measures aiming to restrict discussions on social justice issues and dismantle DEI programs threatening academic freedom and free speech. Who cares? Seriously, who cares? Just like they have the right to say and do what they want to do, we have the right to say and do what we want to do too. If they want to invoke the Second Amendment, freedom of speech, we invoke the Second Amendment, freedom of speech. You don't get to say and do whatever you want and then tell us we can't say and do whatever we want. Doesn't go like that. We've always survived as a people and will continue to survive as a people. And in closing out this article, the former president of Spelman said, when we talk about DEI, that word diversity in particular resonates for many people. Sounds like you're talking about people of color, and if you're white, you feel left out of that conversation. Whatever. If you are white in America and you can't make it, you got a problem. Let me say that again. If you are white with your white privileged self in America and you can't make it, you can't succeed without specialized and subsidized programs, something is wrong. In an ideal world, we would understand diversity as everyone. That's what it means. Affirming the identity is not affirming just the identity of those on the margin. It's affirming everyone's identity. When everyone feels seen, heard, and understood, everyone has a sense of belonging. That sense of belonging is a great predictor of whether you will feel like you can thrive in a particular institution. She views the current backlash against DEI, and I'm going to close with this, and other forms of social progress as part of a historical pattern, referencing Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s 1967 book, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community? A great book. highlights his observation. After every period of racial progress, there's a pushback against that progress. Quote, close quote. Having been born in 1954, the year of Brown versus Board of Education decision that desegregated public schools, she has witnessed most forward progress over 70 years. The culmination of Barack Obama's election, certainly in 2008 and again in 2012, certainly seems to have been the impetus for voter suppression activity, which took off in 2013 and since to prevent that kind of election again. You can try to prevent it, but it's going to happen again. You can move the goalposts. You can try to change the rules. You can do whatever you want to do. Eventually, it's going to happen again, whether they like it or not. No one can stop you and I from succeeding except us. People's opinions, thoughts, their negative speaking, thinking, acting ways can't prevent you and I from succeeding. No one can stop me from succeeding because I believe in me. Never surrender, never quit. What are your thoughts on the genocide? I'm going to do an entire special about that. Then you'll know exactly what I think, and I will say it boldly.